Look what you did! Now the whole game's upside down.
Did you feel that? The whole room shifted, not because you moved, but because someone else stood. Ooh, that wasn't supposed to happen. Not in their script, not in their game. See, you were meant to be alone, surrounded, cornered, bleeding, in silence while the audience clapped for your suffering. But then, one shadow moved. One voice cracked the silence, and the air changed. Surprise. The watchers panicked. The masters froze. Because the question that echoed through their marble halls was one they never prepared for. Who the fuck just stood up for you? And in that single breath, the entire game collapsed. The moment it happened, the room didn't just go quiet. It fractured, like glass dropped in a cathedral. One shadow dared to move. One figure dared to stand. And in that breath, their empire shook. You should have seen them. Kings jolting upright in their velvet chairs. Generals biting their lips until blood stained their medals. Secretaries fumbling their pens. Eyes darting to the cameras that suddenly felt blind. And in the back rooms, those sacred back rooms, you could hear the silence rattle. They called it absolute control, unshakable order. A grip carved into law, steel, and ritual. But all it took was one act of defiance. Not a war, not a revolution, not fire raining from the skies. No, just one unexpected ally rising from the shadows. And their entire illusion trembled. Do you understand the comedy here? They built their thrones on fear. They polished them with obedience. They cemented them with silence. And yet, the second someone dared to stand beside you, those mighty seats cracked like old bones. Picture it, a banquet, hall lined with portraits of conquerors. Marble, floors cold as a morgue, gold crowns gleaming beneath chandeliers, and then a chair scrapes, just a chair as wood against stone. That sound alone made the elite choke on their wine, because it meant the story they wrote, the script they rehearsed, wasn't absolute anymore. Generals whispered into radios, but no orders came back. Phones lit up in hidden bunkers, but the voices on the other end stuttered. Documents marked classified suddenly meant nothing. And kings, yes, kings, looked at one another with that quiet terror. If he's not alone, then what are we? You see, their control was never power. It was theater, a stage play of masks and uniforms. And when someone dared to stand with you, the curtain slipped. The actors broke character. The illusion collapsed. They wanted the world to believe your silence proved weakness, that isolation proved defeat, that no one would ever dare risk themselves for you. But the second that shadow moved, the lie cracked. Because if one voice can defy them, who says another won't? And another? And another? That's why they froze. Not because of the ally, not because of the act, but because it proved what they swore was impossible. Their system wasn't airtight. Their grip wasn't unbreakable. Their power wasn't destiny. It was paper. And you just lit the match. Listen closer. In those gilded chambers, men who spoke with thunder suddenly whispered like beggars. Women who signed decrees with blood-stained pens suddenly hesitated. And generals, those stiff-backed soldiers, they clenched their fists, but their veins trembled. They couldn't admit it aloud, but every eye said the same thing. We're losing it. And you didn't roar, you didn't fight, you didn't even move. All you did was watch, as one unexpected ally toppled. Centuries of pomp with a single act of defiance. That's the real punchline. Their power wasn't unshakable. It was fragile, dependent, built on silence like scaffolding. And when silence broke, so did they. What a delicious shiver. The shiver through their thrones, the quake in their temples, the laughter echoing in your chest as kings generals and priests realized the world wasn't theirs to command anymore. It never was. It was waiting for you. They swore they saw everything, every corridor, every whisper, every flicker of shadow in a locked room. They called it surveillance, intelligence, omniscience. Wrapped in wires, cameras and spies with polished shoes, maps stretched across war tables, pins stabbed into cities like voodoo dolls, files stacked higher than monuments, stamped in red ink, classified, eyes in the sky. Ears in the wall, lips always moving in backroom corners. But when the moment came, when one soul dared to stand beside you, their spyglass cracked. Their empire of watching eyes went blind. Delicious, isn't it? All those billions spent on satellites, networks, and whispers. All those men trained to predict your every breath. And yet, the only move that mattered slipped past them. Not a trick, not a grand conspiracy, just chaos, your chaos. Moving in silence they couldn't measure. Picture the scene. Rooms full of monitors, glowing blue in the dark, analysts scribbling equations, tracking patterns like priests reading omens, and then nothing, no warning, no alert, no prophecy, just silence, until it was too late. Maps burned at the edges, files turned to smoke, whispers scattered like ashes in the wind. Their prophecy machine broke down, gears grinding, sparks flying. And in its ruins, one truth screamed louder than all their static. They weren't the hunters. They were the blind. Do you feel it? The shift? The predator realizing the prey isn't prey anymore. Oh, they leaned on their spyglass like a crutch, believing every variable was nailed down, every angle accounted for, every shadow tracked. But one step, one act of defiance they couldn't forecast, and the spyglass shattered in their hands. They stared through broken lenses, bleeding from their palms, eyes wide, mouths open. The omniscient turned fools in an instant. And you laughed, because chaos has always been yours, unwritten, unmeasured, unstoppable. Their networks depended on logic, on numbers, on predictability, but you never played numbers. You played paradox. You thrived in the cracks where their rules didn't apply, and that's why they couldn't see it coming. Their hunters became statues. Their prophets became liars. Their generals became gamblers with empty dice. And in that collapse, the game shifted, because if they couldn't predict one moment, who says they can predict the next, or the avalanche waiting just beyond their blind spot? That's what killed them, not the act itself, but the terror of uncertainty, the realization that their so-called control was a child's toy, fragile as paper in a storm. So when the ally rose and the silence cracked, it wasn't just their system that fell. It was their faith in their spyglass, faith in their maps, faith in their omniscience. And once faith dies, power follows. The spyglass is dust now. Their eyes are ash. Their ears ring with their own fear. And you stand untouched, laughing in the blindness they swore was impossible, because chaos never belonged to them. It belonged to you. The panic starts here. Not from you, not from them, but from the gap they never accounted for. The door they swore was sealed. It creaked open. The circle they swore was sacred. It broke. The guest they never invited? He pulled up a chair, and oh, how their blood froze. Kings with crowns too heavy to hold. Fingers twitching on jeweled thrones. Generals with medals pinned to hollow chests. Eyes darting like cornered prey. And the high priests of secrecy, muttering curses they couldn't finish, because someone slipped through. Someone they didn't summon. Someone who didn't kneel for permission, didn't sign their papers, didn't follow their script. A shadow walked into their banquet, sat, at their golden table, and didn't wait for introductions. Do you see it? Their rituals, exposed as theater, their exclusivity, shattered glass, their sacred codes ripped into confetti, the locks they trusted, they rattled, the guards they trained, they turned pale, the chains they polished like trophies, they clanged, loose, powerless. They thought power was invitation, that you only matter if they stamp your name, that strength is proven by approval letters, that loyalty is bought with contracts. But the one who rose didn't need their pen, didn't need their blessing, didn't need their stage. Loyalty, like that, it can't be manufactured, it can't be auctioned, it can't be signed into existence. It erupts, it burns, it chooses, and it chose you. So their banquet, that golden hall of polished deceit, turned into a courtroom, every chandelier flickering like a noose, every wine glass shaking like a confession, because the uninvited guest wasn't just a stranger, it was a mirror, and he showed them the cracks in their empire, the whispers of betrayal behind their curtains, the tremor in their own sworn brothers, the fear that one by one their fortress will turn hollow. And here's the joke, the sharp twist of it all. They claimed eternity. They claimed permanence. But their so-called eternity collapsed the moment one voice said, "No, not a legion, not an army, not a kingdom, just one man, one step, one refusal." And suddenly, their chains weighed nothing, their crowns rusted on their heads, their silence shattered into echoes they couldn't contain, the guest they didn't summon. He redrew the map, he rewrote the oath, he tore the veil, and you sat watching, laughing, because you always knew the strongest power doesn't knock on gilded doors, it breaks them, the real invitation. It was never theirs to give. Well, the sky didn't sing, the pit didn't roar, even the eternal sides didn't know where to stand. Trumpets slipped from angelic fingers, golden notes turned to choking gasps, hymns they rehearsed for millennia, broken mid-syllable, bleeding into silence, and the demons. Oh, the demons, tongues sharpened like blades, jaws dripping venom. Yet when they looked your way, they clenched their teeth and swallowed their own poison, because suddenly no one knew the script anymore. The rules, the eternal codes, the sacred balance carved into stone, burned. One act, one spark, and now the holy and the wicked stared across the same trembling abyss, the angels who swore they'd defend the light. Their halos dimmed, their wings twitched like nervous paper. They didn't know whether to kneel or strike. The demons who bragged they ruled the dark. Their flames flickered low, their claws retreated like broken daggers. They didn't know whether to bore or flee. You see the joke, don't you? All that talk of hierarchy, of sacred order, of good against evil, crumbled in seconds because you stood where no one was supposed to, between the lines. Outside the script. In the forbidden zone, they swore was untouchable. And the uninvited guest, oh, he wasn't just man, he was rupture, he was rewrite, he was the glitch in their holy software. Trumpets silenced, drums muted, even the choirs of the cosmos swallowed their words. Because you broke the symmetry, the careful balance of light and shadow, angel and demon, sanctuary and inferno, tilted into madness. And oh, how delicious it was. Archangels, dripping with authority, tugged their robes like guilty men, their scrolls, glowing with laws eternal, suddenly looked like blank parchment. Demons, horned with pride, scratched the ground in confusion, their contracts, once binding forever, curled into ash mid-sentence. No dominion stood firm, no throne stayed steady. The heavens cracked, the pits shrank, and in the middle there was you, the untouchable, the one both sides couldn't name. Not angel, not demon, not pawn, not piece, but player. You rewrote the story in their faces, and they, those who bragged of eternity, couldn't keep up with a single moment. That's the punchline, isn't it? All their sermons, all their curses, their forever promises, snapped like twigs in the fire of one act they couldn't predict. Heaven didn't know whether to sing. Hell didn't know whether to scream, so both stood silent. And silence, my dear, is the sound of surrender. You stripped the cosmos of its confidence. You peeled the mask off eternity. And what did you reveal? That their hierarchies are fragile. Their rules are theater. Their balance is a child's game. They don't hold the story anymore. You do, and here comes the sound. Not war drums, not thunder, but the sharp, thin crack of glass. Their empire, this shining palace they paraded as eternal, wasn't marble, wasn't steel. It was glass, decorated, polished, elevated high, but glass. One act of defiance. One ally rising where silence was demanded. And suddenly the chandeliers began to sway. The thrones creaked. The walls shivered like mirrors about to shatter. You saw their eyes, didn't you? Those kings with jeweled crowns. Those generals with medals heavy as anchors. They swallowed hard, as if a whisper could collapse the ceiling, because they knew the truth. Their absolute grip wasn't forged in iron. It was staged, a theater, painted sets, fragile props, actors reading lines they no longer believed. And when one voice broke script, the illusion cracked. The glass towers they boasted of splintered down the middle. Reflections warped into grotesque shapes. Every chandelier, each glittering lie of power, swayed like a noose above their heads. Their stability, a joke. Their order, a mask. Their empire, a snow globe, waiting for one hand to shake it. And you shook it. The cracks spread faster than they could cover them. Paint peeled, masks slipped. Even the marble floors, polished by centuries of subservience, quaked under the weight of exposed fragility. You could almost laugh. All that pomp, all that ceremony, and yet their crowns turned to ash. The touch of one uninvited hand. The glass palace. It was never about strength. It was about silence. As long as no one questioned, as long as no one stood. The illusion stood tall, but now the mirrors show the cracks. Now the chandeliers swing like pendulums. Now the thrones groan under their trembling bodies. The show is over. The audience sees the wires, the unshakable order they bragged of, revealed as theater, fragile, hollow, pathetic. And the best part, they can't patch it back together, not with laws, not with armies, not with blood, because once glass shatters, it never returns to the same shape. They thought their empire was eternal. But eternity cracked with a single defiance. A fracture they can't repair. A reminder they can't erase. The palace still stands, but only in fragments. And every time they breathe, every time they sit on their fragile thrones, they hear the echo of breaking glass, and they know. It's only a matter of time before the whole palace collapses. Do you hear it? Not cheers, not protests, but silence. The kind of silence that walks like a funeral march. Because tonight, it's not kings being buried, not generals, not soldiers, not systems. It's their certainty. The only thing they swore would never die, the one jewel they thought eternal. The smug conviction that the game was theirs, that no matter how many pieces moved, the board belonged to them, gone, lowered into a golden casket, lined not with velvet, but with ashes of burned contracts. Every oath they wrote, every promise signed in blood, burning, curling, vanishing, their certainty smothered in smoke. Crowns, those heavy circlets they polished for centuries, now rest on empty heads. placed with trembling hands, on thrones that creak, on shadows that refuse to rise. Look at them, their generals clutching, medals like rosaries of rust, their priests staring at broken scriptures, their bankers counting coins that turn to dust between their fingers. Certainty was their god, but their god lies cold, and they stand like mourners, afraid to admit it. You see, armies can regroup, systems can rebuild, but certainty, once slain, it never resurrects. The march continues. Footsteps without drums. Black veils of silence covering their halls. Every whisper feels like a eulogy. Every glance, a confession. Because what truly kept them standing wasn't the steel, wasn't the money. It was the arrogance of being untouchable, and when one defiance brought their empire to tremble, that arrogance was strangled, that certainty choked, that illusion pronounced dead. Do you smell it? The incense of failure, sweet, bitter, poisonous. They light it themselves, pretending it's tradition, when it's actually mourning, a funeral with no coffin, a burial with no body. Because the corpse is invisible, but the loss is absolute. Their certainty is gone, and without it, every soldier doubts his orders, every priest doubts his scripture, every king doubts his throne. They'll cling. Yes, they'll dress the corpse in silk, sit it upright at banquets, force it to smile in photographs. But they know, the world knows they're feasting with a ghost, and that ghost whispers louder than any anthem they could sing. So, let the march play on, let the crowns sit on empty heads, let the contracts burn in golden caskets, because you didn't just wound them, you didn't just scatter their soldiers, you didn't just bend their systems, you killed their certainty, and once certainty dies, nothing and no one can ever bring it back. The silence remains, but it's no longer fragile. It's eternal, etched into their monuments, branded into their shattered crowns. The paradox? It wasn't solitude that made you rise. It wasn't isolation that built your legend. It was the unexpected, the one who stood, the act they never calculated, never scripted, never permitted. And when that happened, their world bent, their hierarchies warped, their rules collapsed. You were not saved. No. You were magnified. Their thrones shrank, while your shadow stretched across their cathedrals. Their angels faltered mid-hymn, while your silence became the hymn itself. The crowns they turned upside down. Now they serve as bowls at your feet. The scriptures they once recited, now whispers of your name replace them. Even their monuments, stone, steel, granite, now stand as canvases. Your legend carved deeper than their architects ever dreamed. They wanted obedience. They demanded silence. But what they received was a silence that reigns, a silence that mocks them, a silence that outlives them, because paradox is power. They built a system to enslave you, yet from within that system rose the one moment they couldn't predict, the ally unapproved, the defiance unscripted, the echo they cannot silence. And so the crown remains, not on their heads, but in the void where certainty died, not on velvet pillows, but in the silence that stretches eternal. You didn't just win. You became legend. You didn't just rise. You became myth. And every time silence falls, it bows to you.